It's December, a fine time of year where we can reflect on the year we just had, and try to be kind to each other more. Christmas movies are usually able to make me happy, since they commonly come with beautiful messages about love and family. And I guess around Christmas time, I'm more willing to get that overly cheesy. Some of my favorite movies are Christmas movies, so I thought it'd be fun to create a top 10 list with all my favorites. Obviously, my list will be a lot different from yours, and there are actually a few holiday classics that I just haven't seen yet. Strangely, I haven't seen It's a Wonderful Life. I'm sure if I had, it would probably be on here, considering it's hailed as the best Christmas movie of all time, but I haven't gotten to it. Anyways, let's get on to the list. The Santa Claus. When Scott Calvin accidentally gets the real Santa Claus killed, he has to become the new Santa, while trying to maintain his relationship with his son. Pretty fucked up premise, with Scott just straight up killing the original Santa. This is a simple good time for me. I don't see this as a great movie by any means, but I can tell it has heart. And Tim Allen plays a pretty good Santa. He might be one of my favorite portrayals of the character, due mostly to his more cynical edge here. Tim Allen plays him with a bit more personality than just a happy ho 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 kind of guy. That's probably because he starts off as just Scott Calvin, a normal dude who's clearly having a pretty rough time. The plotline with Charlie blatantly preferring his mother to his father is pretty rough, and you really feel bad for Scott as he tries to win his son over. Though the result of that is that I think Charlie is pretty fucking annoying. He only likes his dad because he's fucking Santa Claus himself, and wouldn't even give him the time of day otherwise. Little bastard. I'll admit, I start to check out when it comes to the actual North Pole stuff. I think the drama in the real world is more interesting. This movie also has one or two lame jokes that made me groan, but it also has a surprising amount of solid ones. And even when I do groan at the jokes, I don't dislike the movie. It's still a cozy time. It's lower on the list because I can't defend it all that well. I just like it. It's fun. It can also pass off as a horror movie, which was proven to me after seeing this guy's recut to make it look like a horror trailer.
I never thought you would stoop to changing your physical appearance. Do you have any concept of how dangerous this is?
We'll revisit the horror genre in a little bit. But as for the Santa Claus, it's a solid flick. National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Clark Griswold is intent on giving his families a perfect Christmas, but everything possible falls apart and reaches a boiling point when Clark is not given his Christmas bonus. This is a strange Christmas movie to me. It left its Christmas innocence behind long ago, and is more interested in having good laughs than having too much heart. Regardless, the comedy in this movie is incredibly strong, and it really does make it a fun experience. Seeing just how badly everything can go is hilarious. The character of Eddie is hit or miss with me. I don't really like the gross-out humor of him, but the jokes directed towards his ignorance are pretty good. Especially when Clark angrily requests to see his boss delivered to his house, and Eddie takes it very literally, kidnapping Clark's boss and bringing him over. But like I said, as funny as this movie is, it's really lacking in heart. My issue with some of the attempted emotional moments is that we're expected to sort of sympathize with Clark. Even though he fantasizes about cheating on his wife, and in the last movie he nearly did cheat on her. Clark's a bastard, so it's hard to feel too bad for him. That's what sort of kept me from loving this movie. I didn't care if he was going to have a good Christmas or not, and I could tell that the movie wanted me to care. But even then, Clark is still a funny character, and his huge rant about not getting the bonus was hilarious. I can't knock on this movie too badly when it makes me laugh this much, so I think it warrants being on the list. Black Christmas. A man, who seems to be named Billy, is giving horrific phone calls to a sorority house. The members of the sorority don't take his calls too seriously before it's too late. As expected from me, we've got at least one horror movie in this list about Christmas. But I think it's a really good movie. First off, this is a genuinely scary horror movie, with a villain who I actually dread showing up instead of anticipating it, like I do with other villains like Chucky or Freddy. The police force trying to find the missing girl is a compelling plot to follow, as we see the girl's friends and parents try really hard to find her. It's actually pretty sad to see them go through all of this heartbreak, when we know she's dead by now. The police characters are also nice to have around, with them genuinely trying to be helpful with the case. John Saxton is a police officer here like he was in Nightmare on Elm Street, but I think we get more screen time with him here than we do with Nancy's dad. He's good here. The side plot with Jess wanting to get an abortion is also compelling, and leads to a great fake-out with her boyfriend Peter, who is made to look like the killer. Jess kills him in self-defense, and the police are convinced that he was behind it all, and leave Jess to rest in the house, as we see the real killer watching her. Then we just hear him calling the phone yet again, leaving what happens next to our imagination. It's a pretty scary ending, with no music during the credits, it's just the phone ringing. As I said, this is a genuinely unnerving horror movie, even for someone like me who watches a lot of scary movies. I got much more involved with the characters than I thought I would. I was just expecting everyone to be unlikable, but the cast is mostly sympathetic, and at points, they can be pretty funny too. I will say, this one gets pretty low on the list because I'm usually watching Christmas movies to be happy, and in turn, this is one of the scariest movies I've ever seen, with a bleak tone throughout. So, as a real Christmas movie, I can only rank it so high. But even still, if you're looking to get scared this Christmas, give this movie a shot. Just don't watch the 2 remakes. A Christmas Story. A kid named Ralphie is intent on getting a BB gun for Christmas, but everyone tells him he'll shoot his eye out. So, he tries to convince his parents, teachers, and even a mall Santa to get him one. I actually saw this movie for the first time for the sake of this video. I knew there were a couple of movies I'd actually want to watch before I made my final lock on the top 10 Christmas movies, and this was one of them. I enjoyed it a good bit, though not to the degree of everyone else. It's a very cozy movie, which is more like a look into this family's life rather than an actual story. Scenes just sort of come along, and the closest we have to a story is Ralphie's pursuit of the BB gun. But that really doesn't hurt the movie that much. It's nice to see the family go out to a Christmas parade, and seeing them open presents together is nice. Ralphie's father is my favorite character. He's pretty gruff, but also clearly loves his family, and when he actually gets Ralphie the BB gun, it's a great moment. That and Ralphie beating up the bully made me emotional when I was genuinely not expecting to feel very much at the moment. The ending is really beautiful too. It's a great movie, and I expect that I'll be watching it again before Christmas comes to a close. I don't know if I'll dare to watch the sequel though, although I am morbidly curious about it. For now, I just have this pleasant movie. Elf. After a child finds himself in the North Pole, Santa and his elves raise him until he's eventually ready to return to society and meet his father, Walter. Unfortunately, Walter is an aggressive man who isn't convinced that Buddy is really his son. I used to watch this movie a ton as a kid, and even now I have a real soft spot for it. It's overly childish and somewhat immature, but I think this movie has a strong heart and some great comedy courtesy of Will Ferrell. The movie's humor has a nice edge to it that I enjoy, with Buddy calling a little person an elf and promptly getting his ass kicked for it. Buddy also walks in on a girl in the shower, and yet she still wants to date him after that? I mean, by that point she didn't really know Buddy's whole deal, so shouldn't he just come off as a pervert here? Oh well, despite that, the movie is still innocent enough to pull off its more sentimental moments. Buddy and Walter's relationship developing is the most interesting part of the movie, and I get genuinely happy when Walter finally accepts Buddy. Walter is a pretty enjoyable and cynical character throughout this, and I think he's my favorite. James Caan plays him, and I know him better as Paul Sheldon from Misery. Seeing him go from a true horror movie to a childish Christmas movie is amusing to me. I will say though, while I do like the father and son stuff, the Santa stuff is pretty boring to me. I don't really get caught up in the drama there, and so the climax is somewhat of a drag to get through. That's my only real issue with this movie, I guess, and even then, it's not too prominent in this movie. I still have fun with this one. A Christmas Carol. I'm not sure if I even have to summarize the plot of this one, but here we go anyways. Ebenezer Scrooge is a real son of a bitch. Around Christmas time especially, which is why free ghosts come and change his ways. In this instance, I'm talking about the 2009 film, or as I usually dub it, the Jim Carrey version. I know a good amount of people don't like this movie, but I actually grew up on it. It's my Christmas Carol, and I'm attached to it. Plus, I think it has some advantages due to being animated. Because this movie is animated, we're allowed to see some great visuals. Yeah, the humans look kinda freaky, but the backgrounds are pretty as fuck. It's like an adventure! Also, as a kid, I had no idea that was Jim Carrey playing Scrooge. He does a great voice for the character, and I think he handles the emotions well. It's also worth noting, while I did love this movie as a kid, it also used to scare the shit out of me. Seriously, the doorbell shit, the ghost of present fucking dying, and just all the goddamn loud noises were terrifying. Figures I'd be putting this on my list with all that horror. It also reminds me that the only other Christmas Carol I watched when I was younger was the Mickey Mouse one. If that was a full-length movie, I'd have it on here for sure. That's a really great retelling, and it also didn't scare the shit out of me. But I'll settle with this movie being the representative of a Christmas Carol. Although, there is a movie later that treads similar ground, but we'll get to that when we get to it. Jingle All the Way. Howard Langston is unfortunately unable to spend much time with his son, leading him to drift apart from his father. To mend their broken relationship, Howard promises to get him the latest and greatest toy, Turbo Man. But he finds out too late that they're all sold out, and so he has to find some way to get his hands on the precious Turbo Man doll. I don't care what anyone says, this is a Christmas masterpiece. Jingle All the Way is actually one of the funniest Christmas movies I've ever seen, and proves that Arnold Schwarzenegger can actually pull off comedy. With this and Last Action Hero, Arnold is actually a pretty funny guy. His sheer determination to get his son a Turbo Man doll leads to some great scenes. We see him fight a crowd of shoppers, get conned by a mall Santa, and eventually he ends up dressed as Turbo Man and flying around with a goddamn jetpack. This movie gets fucking crazy, and I'm all for the ride. I love movies that just have fun like this, with no regard to how absurd the whole thing is. And can I just mention how the entire world around Howard is fucking nuts? These guys at the store have the strangest reaction where Arnold wants to know if they have a Turbo Man doll. And yet, the emotional core of this movie is strong. I really do believe Howard loves his son, and wants to be there for him. In this case, the comedy actually helps with the heart of the movie, because while it's hilarious how far Howard is willing to go to get the doll, it also shows us just how much he really cares about his son, and what he's willing to put on the line to make him happy. Arnold also had to prevent himself from getting cucked by Phil Hartman, and that leads to some funny scenes. Most notably a phone call regarding cookies.
Put that cookie down! Now!
This movie just has a great sense of humor. Howard breaking into the record studio to get the Turbo Man doll is the funniest scene in the movie, with Howard wearing a big smile as he breaks into the man's office. I wish more people would give this movie a shot. It's genuinely fun, but I can see why it wouldn't be for everyone. It really does get outlandish towards the end, which could turn people off. Plus, the kid isn't that great in this. I could see him annoying people. And yet, that isn't enough to prevent this from being one of my favorite Christmas movies. Scrooged. Frank Cross is the president of a television company, but he has become bitter and greedy ever since he broke up with his girlfriend. However, three ghosts come along to show him his past, present, and future, hoping to set him straight. Alright, so, I know I had A Christmas Carol on here earlier, but I felt that Scrooged was different enough from the usual telling of the story that I could talk about them separately here. Anyways, this movie is truly great. It's definitely a Christmas Carol tailor-made to be my favorite, with its snarky, self-aware humor, riffing on TV executives, and to cap it all off, Bill Murray. Bill Murray was always going to be a great pick to play a Scrooge-like character, and he's hilarious in the role. What I like about his portrayal here is that he isn't just playing it for comedy. For Bill's sarcastic characters, you usually don't see them getting too serious, but here we see him go through a lot, with him seeing his childhood and crying, and later, when he sees Grace's son in a mental ward, he desperately claims that he can fix this. Seeing the pressure build on him during that scene is great, and he's still able to pull off some comedy soon afterwards without it being too jarring. I love the ghost in this one too. The cab driver is my favorite for sure. I just love everything he says, and how he's been doing this for several people already. The ghost of the president is also pretty funny, when she's just beating the shit out of Frank the whole time. And I really like how the future ghost has television screens on his face, considering that Frank is the president of a TV company. This is the first time I've ever really liked the ghosts in terms of personality, whereas in other adaptations they just have to get across a message. The ending of this film I could see being too cheesy for some people, but I really like it. Seeing Frank throw caution to the wind with his job, all to give a speech to people about how rewarding it is to be a good person, is great to see. I also think it's warranted, considering the rest of this movie is incredibly bleak when it isn't too busy being hilarious. There's a lot of sad stuff here, so having an overly happy ending balances things out a bit. This is just one of my personal favorites. I can't get enough of this movie. Give it some more love. Gremlins. After Billy gets a gremlin named Gizmo for Christmas, he accidentally gets it wet, producing more unhinged gremlins that eventually grow in numbers and wreak havoc on the town. It's up to Billy and his girlfriend Kate to stop them. People don't usually think of Gremlins as a Christmas movie, in a similar vein to Die Hard, but I say Gremlins is absolutely a Christmas movie. There's snow, Christmas trees, and Gizmo is given to Billy as a Christmas present. And we can't forget Kate's horrific backstory about her father dressing up like Santa and dying after he got stuck in the chimney. This movie's fucking great. The Gremlins themselves look great, and I love how much fun they're having. Even though they're violent monsters, they're clearly having a good time just fucking around with each other, going to bars, and eventually a movie theater to watch Snow White. Any scene with the Gremlins is great. Also, Billy and Kate are likable protagonists to follow. As I mentioned, Kate has a pretty sad backstory, which makes her pretty sympathetic, even though it does kind of come out of nowhere. Billy is a nice guy too, who I root for despite my love for the Gremlins. Also, Gizmo is a good little guy. I like how this movie tricks you with him at first, making you think this movie is going to be cutesy before he eventually spawns the hideous Gremlins. I honestly can't tell if this is a horror movie or not. It's certainly not bloody, but people do get killed by the Gremlins. I guess it's more kids' horror like Goosebumps, but much scarier than that. Maybe that's why I'm so attached to the Gremlins. I love that subgenre of kids' horror. It leads to a lot of creative stuff. I will say though, I do prefer Gremlins 2 personally. That movie takes the insanity of this one and goes into overdrive. It really becomes a truly impressive live-action cartoon, and it just really appeals to my sense of humor, with its jabs towards cinema and self-referential humor. Plus, all the new Gremlin variants are great. Unfortunately, I couldn't have it take the original's place here because, unlike the original, this does not take place around Christmas. The Gremlins just find themselves lost in New York. But the original Gremlins can't be overlooked. It still brings the insanity of the Gremlins, and the scenes of them causing mayhem are great. I watch this one every year, as unconventional as it may be. It's a really fun party. Home Alone! Kevin McAllister is left home alone when his parents accidentally leave him behind on a trip. What's worse is there are two robbers named Harry and Marv who are trying to break into the house. But Kevin is much smarter than anyone thinks, and proves to be more than capable of defending his house. That's right, my favorite Christmas movie is Home Alone. In fact, Home Alone is in my top 10 favorite movies in general. This movie really gets to me on an emotional level, with its big laughs and incredibly powerful emotional moments. First, I want to talk about those big laughs. The entire section of the traps never fails to get a laugh out of me. The more brutal ones, like the hot iron and the fucking nail in the foot, just get me every time. I think by far the funniest part is when Harry has a spider on him, and Marv is about to beat it with a crowbar. Harry has no idea what's going on, and just pathetically moans.
Marv, what are you doing? Marv.
To which Harry gets up and starts hitting Marv with the crowbar. Harry and Marv are a great source of comedy, even before they're starting to get mutilated. They have great personalities and play off each other really well. They take digs at each other, but for one reason or another, they're friends and know a lot about each other. They're great in the sequel, too. I love Lost in New York, too, and how it takes the first movie's traps and really ups the ante with even more dangerous traps, but I think the original is definitely better, with its incredibly strong heart. Kevin is a great character to follow. We see him get mad at his family in a realistic way. You understand why he's mad, and you understand why his mom is mad at him. Seeing Kevin realize how much he misses his family is heartwarming, especially when he goes up to a guy in a Santa costume and asks him to tell the real Santa to bring his parents back. That stuff really gets me. It helps that Kevin isn't just some bland kid character. He has some snark and wit to him, which makes him really enjoyable to watch. Seeing how clever Kevin can be is great, and you root for him to come out on top against the bandits, who are really out for blood at the end of this. I actually really love his dynamic with the wet bandits, with Kevin constantly egging them on. The little wave he gives them as they're hauled off by the police is great. Another great moment for Kevin is when he's talking to his neighbor at the church. This is my favorite scene in the movie, with him realizing the old man isn't scary at all, and the two just have a genuine conversation about family. Marley gives Kevin advice, but then Kevin is actually able to give him advice about his son, who he had an argument with. At the end, when we see Marley reunite with his son and he waves to Kevin, it gets me every time. Also, seeing how far Kevin's mom is willing to go in order to get Kevin is really endearing, and shows just how much she really loves him despite their arguing. When she finally makes it home to Kevin, it's really touching. That's what I really love about this movie. It has amazing peaks in both its comedy and its heart, proving to be an incredibly positive experience. That's what makes it the greatest Christmas movie for me. That message about loving your family, even if sometimes you forget you do, is powerful. It never ceases to put a smile on my face, no matter when I watch it.